Good evening and welcome to Flat Earth UK Live. Joining me tonight is Chris Rock of Flat Earth Reality. How are you doing, Chris?
I'm wonderful, Nathan. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. Hello, everyone.
It's better. Having a good day, as they say.
Oh, wonderful so far. It's early for me, but well, it's like 1 o'clock. It's just the day's just starting. So I hope everyone else is having a good day. How are you?
Not too bad. Not too bad at all. And to anybody joining us in chat, thank you very much for being here. I'd like to start off Flat Earth UK by asking my guests how they found out the Earth is flat, Chris. So maybe you can kick us off by telling us exactly that. How did you find out Earth is flat?
Wow. Well, it all started for me by researching, just having not liking television any longer and researching whatever came up on YouTube. I think I was into Kennedy, and then I was into a couple other little things. I found Apollo, and when I laughed that off the first time I heard about it. The moon mission, of course, we went to the moon. I'm 45 years old, and I had never, maybe 44, I'd never heard that we had never gone to the moon. So I laughed, but I looked, and the very first 2-hour documentary that I saw convinced me that we never went to the moon. And I looked into that for a couple of days, and then on the side it says related videos on YouTube. And of course, one of the things that they related was is the Earth flat. I think it was Stars Are Souls was the video. Now this was probably maybe end of November, early December 2014. So a little bit before the big spike in like March, I'll say, that came a few months later. And there wasn't that many videos. There wasn't like millions of videos like there is now. So Stars Are Souls was the one I clicked on, and I watched it 5 minutes, and I laughed, and I turned it off. And
so it wasn't actually a realization, but that was the first introduction to it.
That was the introduction, yeah. And I laughed, and my friend was with me, and he laughed, and we didn't even go down that road. We had already went down the craziest road together of Apollo, and we couldn't believe what we found. We weren't ready for the flat Earth. About a week later, I found it again, and it was another Stars Are Souls video, and I watched it. And this time I was like, okay, I'll watch it this time. Like, I'll watch it. I'm not going to watch 5 minutes of it. I'm going to watch it. And he made a couple of good points, and enough to make me look for another video. And then I found Math Powerland on Eric Dubé's channel, which now is a big controversy, obviously. But anyway, so I watched that, and I was like, wow, that's interesting. And then I found Eric Dubé, of course, and then I was pretty well hooked. And now it's been a year and a half of me, well, a year and 4 months of me trying to, wrap my head around all the aspects of it. It didn't take me much longer after I really looked into it, though, to say, yeah, there's something going on, because it sparked a memory. And the memory was me going to a beach at I live on the coast of Lake Ontario, which is one of the largest lakes in the world, and we have a massive, beautiful sunrise position where I live. But one of the things is you can also see the CN Tower from where I live. So that's a major monument. I knew the size of it from Google, and I went. The memory it sparked of me was going to the beach and looking across the beach and seeing New York in the distance, which I learned was 35, 36 miles away. And after the flat Earth came in, and I learned what the curvature of the Earth was, I was like, wait a minute, how could I see 36 miles away? A coast that's a couple 100 feet high. How can I see that? And then it sparked a bunch of, how can I say it? I had to go and do a few experiments. So I used the CN Tower because I knew its height and whatnot. And I went from different locations from 30 miles, 44 miles away. And I tried to do some easy math, visual math on different days, different conditions, and see if it made sense. And it certainly didn't make sense. So here I am a year and 4 months later.
When you say it didn't make sense, it's hard to fit between globe thinking and flat Earth thinking, but it's always nice to give a bit of clarity. So when you say it didn't make sense if we live on a spinning ball.
Well, it didn't make sense if we live on a curved Earth the size that it did. Of course, at this point in my journey, it was right at the beginning. I hadn't learned about the spin or not spin like aspect of anything yet. It was just, is there curvature or not? And There seemed to be, obviously, the bottom of distant skylines wouldn't be there. There would be some obscurity, but it wasn't near the amount that should have been if we lived on a sphere the size we live on. So that started the journey, and the discrepancy wasn't just a little bit; it was a grand amount. It was large. So we're talking when there should have been close to 500 feet missing, in between 400 and 500 feet missing because of my height and altitude. There was less than 100. So it's something that makes you go, wow, let's look into that. Let's see what makes that happen. And so then I learned about, mirages, superior mirages, what causes atmospheric refraction, what kind of conditions that caused. And because I live right on the lake, I can view those conditions any day. I can just go there and look. Doesn't matter what condition. And we always are able to break that rule, always. There's almost no time you can't. Only when it's so foggy that you can't see is the only way you can't break that rule.
And that's one of the things I like the most about Flat Earth is that you can take power in the fact that you can just go and have a look. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, it's synthetic, man. You can just go make an observation and see for yourself. At least it can start you on the right way, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, before Flat Earth, were you at all conspiratorial? Were you into aliens? I think we chatted before about a little bit.
Oh, yeah, I was a big space head growing up, like most of us. Loved all that stuff. Grew up with Star Trek, the Jetsons, Star Wars, everything. Babylon 5. I even watched Red Dwarf, for goodness sakes. You know what I mean? So.
Oh, you're a Red Dwarf fan? I didn't know that.
Oh, I was for years, yes. Yeah, I watched probably all of them. So.
Superb.
Oh, yeah. Cat's cool. But
so
yeah, I like them all.
Reasonably open-minded, but you were. I mean, I was a bit of a NASA fanboy, all the terms meant, and I'd watch launches and stuff because I was into it and subscribed to NASA. What's it called? Yep. Science at NASA, not the NASA channel or Math Powerland. But yeah, so I was into it, and you were the same, where you were into sci-fi and space in general.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that was one of the things my mother and I had in common. We both liked Star Trek. We grew up with it. She liked it, so I got into it. But I always liked that stuff. That was the most interesting things in the world, were things you can't explain and things that make you think. And I definitely believe in UFOs because there's lots of things that I personally cannot identify that fly around. That's a truth of the matter. They may not be aliens from another world, or they may be aliens from another pond, or they may not be aliens at all. They may be just our technology. There are things that fly around for sure, but I'm not a believer in aliens from other planets anymore, specifically because of the flat Earth.
Was there any sense of loss? I mean, for me, certainly, when I had the revelation that space was misrepresented, there was a sense of loss. Did you get the same?
Each day that I made the journey into flat Earth, like I said, once I got in, like after a week of kind of contemplating, I was like, yeah, there's no curvature. I can't, you can't deny that. And you keep going. Then you have to start weighing that truth against your own reality, what you picture as reality, which at that time was spinning Earth, globs of globes and heliocentric universes, and as many planets as possible and life out there. So I absolutely had to weigh that, especially since I was really into the UFO disclosure movement. So I was up to date, and I was following Dr. Stephen Greer and all his work, and going into the citizen hearings and trying to actually get disclosure to happen. So I was really into that. Now that I think back on it, I think it was a scam. I think the whole thing was a ploy, was a gatekeeper, was
so
another
off-world programming. Because you said obviously we may have aliens, they may be in another puddle or pond or whatever. But I think most of the current sci-fi and even the science definitely is just off-world programming to convince us that we're globular and that there are stars that are a million times bigger than our own sun and planets.
I agree.
And so on and so forth. So it's just propaganda.
Yeah,
but you also had exactly. You had a bit of a, I don't want to call it a spat, but a few fallings out here and there over religion. And maybe you could talk us through how you maybe left a bit of religion and then came back to it a little bit. Does that make sense?
Sure. Well, again, when I became a born again. I grew up Catholic. I grew up in the Roman Catholic Church. However, as most kids, I found it pretty boring, and I didn't pay much attention to the church. However, I got my moral values from my parents and from the church. Sure, that's morally, I thought I was a pretty good guy, I guess. I wasn't a bad guy. But I certainly didn't understand the depths of spirituality. Now, I've come to realize I've been what you call a born again Christian for about just over 10 years now, maybe 11 years. And there's a big difference from being a Bible believer to being a God believer than going to church and believing what a man says about that, a dogma about that. Because man can mess things up so bad it isn't funny. So I always say when I talk about religion to other people, don't believe me, don't believe your preacher. Look the things up for yourself and make your own decision. So it's very important to me that happens. So that's what I found happening, was that everybody was teaching their own version of what was going on, and they didn't really gel, like, biblically. So I didn't have much faith in that. So I was like, okay, let's find out what's really going on in life. And I started to watch Art Bell, and I started to listen to Art Bell and the Coast to Coast shows, and all the alternative understandings that I could get my hands on. And I went through the New Age spirituality movement a little bit. I actually found Santos Bonacci that way, which he's a wealth of knowledge, but and through him I found the free man movement, which was absolutely blew my mind. I couldn't believe that even existed, and I had no idea about it. Fiat currency, the banking system, the your all caps name, the scarecrow. I had no idea about that, and that blew my mind. And that was like, there's something so grand afoot here, and we don't know about it. We are literally slaves to the system, and we don't know it. And nobody in general knows it. Only the people that are truth seekers know it. And
well, tell us.
didn't know
there may very well be people who watch this who have no idea about New World Order or any of that kind of stuff. Maybe explain it. Talk us through it.
Well, like I said, I found Santos Bonacci who was in a little bit of trouble with the law over parking tickets and some other things, but he didn't drive with a license. I think that's what it really boiled down to, is he just didn't care, right? Which is, he kind of walked the walk. He walked the talk, in other words. He did it, and got in a lot of trouble for it. So he had to go to court and defend himself. And his battle opened me up to and his speeches obviously opened me up to the fact that there's this really weird banking system going on that most people don't understand. Of course, truth seekers do, because we look into these kind of things. But how the money, like the U.S. currency or the Canadian currency, for example, isn't backed by a tangible gold or silver like they say it used to be with Fort Knox and whatnot. There's nothing to back the money up. It can crash at any time. That's just one aspect of it. The other aspect would be that that the people that are in charge of you and I, we are basically become commodities when we're born. Our parents sign us away to the government with birth certificates and registration forms. Anything you register with the government becomes their property, not your property. You're just the title user of it, but you're not necessarily the owner of it. So you don't own your car, you don't own your house, you don't own your children, you don't own anything if you've registered it. And because you're registering it with a company. So what they've done is they've created a false entity in your name with, which is represented as a full capitalized version of your name. So anything you get with a full capitalized version is actually not a live being. It's the paper version of that live being. And they've actually got a stock market. They put you on the stock market. They make profit off of your futures, what they think you're worth. And it's just a vicious cycle of forgery that you and I know nothing about. And well, unless you look into it. And accounts of every person would have millions of dollars in their account, depending on what, maybe they were if they were in a court case, there'd be some money that was allotted for that court case. It would be made under their name. And it's basically a giant accounting system that's been worked out in all federal systems. And the money that's generated anywhere, the money that we know about is a drop in the bucket compared to what's out there. That's basically what I want to say. And the scarecrow, if anybody doesn't know about it, just type that into YouTube and you'll start finding some great resources, great videos about it.
I mean, I've always felt with money that money's just there to distract us and keep us busy. Would you agree with that?
Well, we've kind of come to the agreement that it's debt. So we're basically sharing debt right now with each other, which is really weird. Um, we don't need money. I think the people that have looked into like the Batu movement and things like that will understand that you can do community living. You can do things that like, hey, I'll help you build a house. You help me build mine, and then you got 10 guys helping you build a house, and you get that house built pretty quick. There's all kinds of little ways we could do that. We don't need big government. I'm not proposing that we get rid of all government, that we're completely anarchist, because that's not feasible in this day and age right now. But um, maybe a lessening would be a better thing, right? So.
Well, it's hard to know. We're at a very early stage of awakening, if you want to phrase it in that way. So to know what the future holds is really difficult for anybody. There's plenty of people out there, some of them good people, some of them complete trolls, that want to take responsibility or ownership of the situation. And in some ways, I think that it sits in two categories. You've got flat Earth, which is the social element, if you want to call this the social elements, then fine, or the proof videos and the websites, all of those things, and the trolls and the personalities, that all sits in flat Earth. But then you've got the fact that the Earth is flat, which is something that's demonstrable, it's measurable, it's testable. We can just go out, like you say, with the tower, with the Sears Tower, you can just go and look. And that's what the difference is between a horrible conspiracy like 9/11, where there's potentially lots of graves being trampled, or the Holocaust, whereas flat Earth is fairly benign in that respect. Would you agree?
I would agree. It doesn't scare as many people off. I think that's why it became as popular as it did so quickly. Like you wouldn't get this rise in 911 seekers, or at least as far out after 911, or any of them, Sandy Hook, Kennedy, any Titanic, anything you want to talk about, Pearl Harbor, it doesn't matter. This rise in the flat Earth, like from 1,000 videos to 6 million videos in just a year, is unheard of. It's just crazy. And the numbers are bigger than I think what they're letting us know. I believe that. I know people have been talking about the numbers are smaller, they're inflated, but personally, I think it's bigger, just based on the amount of videos that are out there, and based on how many I've made, how many you've made, and the average Joe doesn't make as many as you or I, for example, and there's 6 million of them out there. There's a lot of video makers, let alone a lot of people that don't make videos. So the movement grew really quick. A lot of people think that has to do with an awakening, the age of Aquarius, kind of 100th monkey effect. Who knows? It's hard to say what did it. Maybe it was, people say it was released, but I still see a lot of control for it if it was released. So
I mean, that's definitely true, but I think it always boils down to what you said earlier, which is you have a flash of something that happened in your life that was unexplainable on a globe. Then that's normally a bit of a trigger. I mean, for me, there's constant flashes of things that you go, yeah, that made no sense, that made no sense, that made no sense. And then you find out flat Earth, and they all go from the back of your mind right to the front. And, that's not something being released. The Earth was always flat. That's the bottom line, I think.
Yeah, exactly. But some people don't want to know that. Like some people don't want their paradigm rocked, and that's the absolute truth. I've talked to some family members who, after getting into it with them, sometimes it can get heated, and you're not really supposed to do that with family. You should just drop a seat and walk away. And that's something I've learned, that you gotta just back off sometimes. Not everybody's ready at the time you're ready. You're ready because I've been in it for a year and a bit, right? So I'm full of all this gusto and information I want to share with everybody, which is something you can't do with everybody right away. Like there's some people that just aren't ready, and one of my family members said, I don't want to know. I don't want to know. What if I just don't want to know?
You've got right in the thick of it and debated them. I mean, that I stuck it up on my channel, and I think the publisher, Spaceman, took it down off his. But you were right in there.
Oh, did he?
Debated with these people with the most severe cases of cognitive dissonance ever. But you were right in the thick of it, explaining perspective and how things work. And in every instance, you get a heliocentric proof thrown back at you, and your reaction was, I'm just not buying it. It's not part of my world anymore, basically.
Eventually,
how did you get involved in that? How did you get to the point where you were debating trolls?
Oh, those guys! Oh my goodness! Well, like I'm addicted to flat Earth, So being addicted to flat Earth, I check the daily videos, what comes out daily, and if I catch up on that, I hit the hourly. But sometimes I just want the live thing, and I hit the live button. So there's a lot of tabs on the search bar on YouTube. If some of you don't, I didn't know for a year that there was a tab on the search bar on YouTube that I could do that with. So there is. And so when you pick live, you'll always get about 4 or 5 things, no matter who. If none of us regular people are on, or no flat earther is on, you'll still get 4 or 5 shows that come up when you type in flat earth and hit the live button. And that's a couple of NASA shows, an Islamic religious show, and a troll show. There's always a troll show going on. Now, because I'm an addict and there was nothing on, I clicked it one day because there was like 10 or 15 people watching. And these guys were on a panel talking crap and saying that there was no answer. And there was one flat earther on the panel, but he wasn't, he didn't have an answer to these guys. And I was just thinking in my head, well, I've got an answer to everything you've said so far. You haven't said anything so far that would make me go, oh, wait, you're right. Nothing, not one thing. So I jumped. They threw the link out there, and I said, okay, and I jumped in. And it wasn't too long after that you jumped in, that same show. And that was the very first show that I jumped in. Now, Antonio and I happened to jump in at the exact same moment or within a minute of each other. So I don't know if there was an exchange going on in the talk before then, because I hadn't been there that long. I've been listening for 5 or 10 minutes. But I jumped in, and these guys were, like, they had a couple of guys that they're not unintelligent people. They're deep in their belief, and it's hard to get anybody out of that. There was a geodetic surveyor on the board, so he said. There was the spaceman guy who is an old style computer coder, and his world is all space. That's what he does now. So there's a couple guys, and Negator X, I think we've seen him around a couple of times. He was there. A few other people. So they're not unintelligent people by any means. They're really trapped in their reality, and they can't seem to break it. So I was just there trying to stick up for flat Earth a little bit, and I realized fairly soon that, they're not gonna even listen, let alone contemplate. So,
I mean, one of the things you were talking to them about was the perspective, which they just couldn't accept. The examples they would give, well, when I'm driving along, I should see this. So they wouldn't accept that what you see is kind of what you get, and things don't change just because we say the Earth is flat. But you would explain these things and give them detailed explanations of why you don't see the bottoms of things. Maybe you could give us, or give the audience, a bit of an explanation of mirages and perspective.
Well, because I have a unique perspective, I guess. I have a unique view of Toronto. Not exactly where I live, but Toronto is just based on this weird arc where the corner of the lake is, where you can get about a 30-mile view from probably, 5 or 6 different really good angles, and they're all 30 miles away from Toronto. It's a weird thing, but we can use the Toronto CN Tower because it's fairly lake. It's right on the lake. It's actually 2 meters below the lake at its base where it's built. We can use that as a guide because we know its height, to visually measure against. So when I do this, I do note that some of the bottom is missing. And you can't just deny that it's there. Some of the bottom is missing, but it's not the amount that's supposed to be for a curved Earth the size they say, a sphere Earth the size they say we are. So what do you do with that? You got to figure it out, right? We know that the horizon is seen at our eye level, basically. It's like, some will say it's an inch below or an inch, it's right there, but we're just going to call it eye level for now. And it always stays there, which is a flat Earth proof on its own. When you go up in a plane, it's always there. It's still at the same eye level. It doesn't drop as it should if you're on a ball. But this is an actual reality. This is an optical illusion, because the ground, or if you look over water, for example, and you see the horizon at eye level, that's like 5.5 feet for your average man. And that's just not what's going on. The horizon, the water is actually at your feet. It's actually right down at ground zero, right at your feet. But we see it up high. So everything slopes up. And that angle that slopes up, that actual angle is the exact thing that makes sunsets and sunrises possible. Because the sky slopes down the exact same way, but oppositely, of course. So when we see the sun overhead position, that's the only time it's the real position. Whereas when it's earlier than overhead or later than overhead, it's only what's called an apparent position. It's not an actual position. It's a perspective thing. It drops in the sky and it gets smaller slowly until it gets out of sight. And if we have the dry condition and the vantage point to see it, we can see it disappear, which is crazy. Like Deep Inside the Rabbit Hole did a couple of videos on that, which was, incredible videos, by the way, showing the different kinds of sunsets. But it's that slight angle that our eyes build from the ground up that makes that effect possible. And it also hides the bottom of the skyline, in my view. Everything is going back in perspective to the vanishing point. So it's getting hidden behind a little bit of atmospheric conditions as well, like moisture in the air. So that it only looks like it's disappearing. It only looks like it's not disappearing. Sorry, it only looks like it's like that's why boats would look like they're disappearing hull first.
Sure.
It'd be because of atmospheric refraction. But we can, conditions. But we can bring a telescope or zoom and get that boat back in. Now there is a point where it's going to go too far and we can't bring it back in, and that's what's going on with her, a city skyscape that's a long way away and whatnot. Now that's only due to that angle that I was telling you about, though.
Sure, so there's going to be a certain degree of atmosphere that comes into contention as well.
Yes. So everything, it's not just one factor, and people have to remember that. We're talking about perspective, making things smaller and farther away, going towards the vanishing point, which is at eye level, not ground level. And we're also talking about that wall of water that our eyes build. People like to call it a hump or whatever. It's theoretically not a hump, but well, whatever. I'll leave that for another day, but that's an optical illusion that our eyes build, and we have to factor that in. And what I see is that even flat earthers don't factor that in a lot of the times, but globers never factor it in. Never. The sun doesn't show perspective. It doesn't. There's no way for the sun to show perspective in the heliocentric model. And of course we see that it does. So
maybe you could go through the actual maths that the heliocentric people use, because they use the 8 inches per mile.
They do.
Or 8 inches per mile squared, depending
squared,
on
right. If you look up Google, it'll say, it won't tell you the squared part on their very first results, but if you dig deep, you'll find it at university sites and whatnot. It's squared. Of course, it has to be first circle. Otherwise, you live on a slope, right?
Sure.
We don't live on a slope. They say we live on this. So, they say it's 8 inches per mile squared, which is very close to the curvature, but that's not the exact formula to figure out how far something is hidden from sight, because we have to factor in our height. And that actually makes a little bit of a difference. Actually, it can make a lot of difference. For example, from 30 miles, it would be 600 feet of curvature. However, from my 5'5" eye level, or 6 foot height, wherever my eyes are, that would make it about 480 feet instead of 600. And if you're up another few feet, it would make it 400 feet. Like this. So there's a relationship. If you're up as high as 20 feet, it would make it 400 feet. So people have to remember that if they're gonna use that kind of math to prove their points in flat Earth, just use the right math. That's all. Don't use 8 inches per mile squared to say that, hey, that thing is hidden 600 feet, when in reality it should be hidden 400 feet. You know what I mean? But it won't be hidden 400 feet anyway, so we're fine. just do the math. That's all. So it's not 8 inches per mile squared is the curvature of the Earth, but it is not how we calculate how much of something is hidden behind the curve, because we have to factor in our height.
Right. I mean, from perspective to water sticking on a ball and one of the heliocentric constant go-tos, which is gravity. How do you overcome this when you've got people throw gravity in your face?
Personally, I like to stick to facts that are contradictions in their model, because they're going to come to us and say, no, gravity holds water to a ball. So I think it's kind of hard to fight that if their reality allows for that belief. right? Their reality allows for planes to fly around with the atmosphere. Now, I can tell them that, yeah, well, the Coriolis effect only affects paper airplanes, but not real airplanes, and it affects bullets, but not cannonballs, and and it affects hurricanes, but not rain or normal weather patterns. So I can kind of get to them with that reality, right? They believe in the Coriolis effect, so I have to come at them with, well, what? Look at the contradictions in it, right?
Yeah, the
How can it
Foucault
work with
pendulum's
a
a really
paper
nice one.
airplane?
I
They
really
actually
like the Foucault
explain it.
pendulum. Do you like that? The Foucault
Oh, the
pendulum's
full
great.
call. Yeah, I had a look at that one too.
I mean, it's
There
just
seems to
bonkers.
be many of them, and even if it did work the way they say, like by some kind of rotation force, still doesn't prove the spin of the Earth, because
Well, no,
they were
but
trying to prove that
it goes to your
Earth
contradiction.
was
They're
moving.
saying you've got planes that stick to the atmosphere, whereas you've got this proof of the spin of the Earth, the Foucault pendulum, which essentially has the Earth spinning underneath it while it swings. So it's a
Right.
complete contradiction to planes, sticking to the
Exactly. They use gyroscopes. I heard you guys talking about gyroscopes the other day or last night, I guess. And yeah, they're absolutely a proof, and that's the same idea. They make their own plane of reference, same as this pendulum is supposed to do. And exactly. So I can say that the pendulum, the Foucault's large pendulums that are supposed to prove this, they have a couple of mechanical realities to them, which is there's a ball and joint. There's some force that's been given to it to start it. There's these things that, put it this way, if the Coriolis effect was a real physical thing that could affect things like pendulums, I would think that they would never need to start it, and that a pendulum would never stop, that the swing of the Earth would do the work for it. And these are things that just don't happen. So Foucault's pendulum is a funny one. Gravity, I like to say, explain helium and gravity. Explain the math behind helium, or the blimp that it carries, or the Zeppelin that's made of, or the metal object that they can lift now with helium. So explain that metal object and helium, because it's all got weight and mass. So explain that in your gravitational mathematics.
And once they've done that, they can then explain that with somebody completely on the opposite side of a ball with that same blimp essentially going away from your feet. It's just complete farce.
Yeah, I agree. And you just got to try and get people to look at one specific angle of something a different way, right? And you can usually judge what kind of person you're dealing with. For example, if they believe the 911 official story, you're probably not going to get them with the flat Earth truth. They're probably not going to be interested or get it. And that's something we've seen too with people opposed to the flat Earth. They seem to believe, not all of them, but they seem to believe the truth of the matter, the official truth versus the real truth.
I mean, when we chatted the other day on Skype, we got to the sort of conversation of the 500 years of the globe and that massive level of programming that people are just accepting of. Maybe you could speak to that.
Well, it's pretty common knowledge how they'll tell you 500 years, and then it kind of worked its way into the church in such a way that it was promoted, it was accepted, and it was like, okay, yeah, we'll do this. And since the church at the time was the educators, there wasn't really a separate education system at that time. That's how it got pushed into that realm, and it's always stayed there. And then we've got our educators, the way it works today, out of that system. Like it was originally that system. So it was always in it. Before 500 years ago is a different matter. However, that globe roundness, sun-centered system was long in effect. It might have not been, the masses didn't know about it, but there were certainly people that knew about it back 2,000 years ago, for example. And I can even find what I believe are traces of it in the Bible. So since I was a Bible scholar for 6 or 7 years, I looked in pretty deep. And now, with the light of the flat Earth on me, it seems that one of the major things that in the Bible is called the mystery of iniquity, and it's like a little message that one of the writers, Paul, gives us in 2 Thessalonians. And And it looks to me like the heliocentric model, the ball, is that mystery of iniquity. So the bad thing that keeps people away from God has been afoot for a very, very long time. And now it's full circle. It's here, like you can't get rid of it. And you and I grew up with it, with mobiles and with wallpaper and bed sheets, and then we get to school and it's a globe on our front desk, and everybody's got that Mercator map on their back. I got one similar on my wall just to remind me of the size of Greenland up there. It's it's bigger than Africa, so it's kind of funny when it's like 14 times smaller or something. So we're indoctrinated from day one, and you and I, being the age we are, or people our age, or slightly older, slightly less, we're indoctrinated literally from cartoons to television programs to big blockbuster movies to stars doing little things on the side and in the public eye. Everything is indoctrinating us into the system. Some of it the people do willingly and knowingly, and some of it are completely brainwashed by the system.
Yeah, my niece is 4. She's not even been to school yet to see the globe on the desk, and she was arguing the toss with me about it being a globe. So, like you say, before they even reach school, the cartoons, the media, whatever's on the television screen, and things in day-to-day life, the billboards that we walk past, the bus shelters with adverts on them, a lot of it's got globe programming in it, so we're stuck with it. One of the things you mentioned this earlier about your pastor saying, "Don't trust me, look it up yourself," and that's a really apt way of putting it. Obviously, it conjures images of looking it up in books, but literally looking it up is kind of appropriate for flat Earth. Wouldn't you agree?
I would, but I didn't know so much at the time. But you're right. Look up. I use it in a couple of my songs because I write music. But just go outside and look. Just look up. Look at the water. Look at the sky. Check it out. People don't like to. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say from the statistic to the failures of the globe. I was hoping you could talk a little bit about some of the heliocentric fails that we can address
I love doing
as opposed to look at.
I love doing that. Yeah, I have a website. I'll just plug it real quick right now. There's nothing for sale on it. So
that was my ham.
TFE. TFER.info. That's the Flat Earth Reality. My initials in that. So TFER.info, and on it I've got a proofs page. And when you click on the proofs link, it'll bring you to my quick set of 36 heliocentric proofs against like their fails. I got 36 heliocentric fails, and I like to, when I talk to people, I like to kind of quote from them because it's just a list of stuff I've been gathering, and a lot of people use the same proofs.
Can you remember any, or do you want to read a couple off? I'd love to just hear them spoken by you, basically, is what I'm angling for.
Sure. The Bedford level, for example. So one of the first things that Flat Earther learns about is Dr. Robotham and how he performed a bunch of experiments at the Bedford level, which is he performed more than one experiment there, by the way, and it was many other people did after him. It was a 6-mile stretch along the old Bedford River, I think it's called, and
it's a canal, the old Bedford level
in Norfolk, England.
Is it
and they use
Cambridge?
I think it's Norfolk.
I could be wrong. Okay.
About 100 years ago, probably during the centuries where it was really popular, and there was an attempt for him to disprove the supposed rotundity of the Earth that had moved its way in. Obviously, by this time it had 300 or 400 years to propagate, and he wasn't buying it, and either were a lot of people. As a matter of fact, it was still a really big debate until World War II. So, and then of course we know what happened shortly after World War II. Everything changed, and then the space program came in. So I like to say the Bedford level when talking about it that I quote kind of two examples. One was him getting in the water chest high with a telescope, and his buddy being in a boat and rowing the boat the length of the 6 miles, and him being in the telescope still being able to see his buddy at the end of the 6 miles. He had a flag on his boat, but he could still see everything. Should have been buried whatever amount of feet, and he wasn't. The second, or another one of his was he got a bunch of flags equal distance above the water, and put them the whole length of the 6 mile stretch. And at the top of each flag was a small ring hole. And he put his telescope at one end of the 6 mile stretch and looked through the ring hole and looked through all the ring holes until the other end, which is impossible on a sphere. And so that's I like to say that about the Bedford level. And it basically proved that, yeah, at least at that canal, the Earth wasn't curving, and that was 6 miles. So there's plenty of height plenty of distance to know if it was curving or not.
That was
Dr.
Robotham. This, I think, Matrix Decode is in the chat at the moment. Actually, he's done a similar thing. But you can, like we said at the beginning, you can go out and do this yourself. You can just go to the beach, focus on a buoy or a boat, and you shouldn't be able to see it if you're on a globe. Simple as that.
Exactly. So, speaking of Dr. Robotham, also did what he called his 30-mile curvature tests, and because he must have had a landmark that he knew 30 miles out. But he could see the boats leaving, and this particular tall masted ship would only disappear at 30 miles out. Like until that point, he could always see it. So, and he also discovered that not only did this break the curvature law by an incredible amount, but that the ship didn't tilt. So while he looked at it not only straight on, but he looked at it from an angle, and the ship didn't tilt away from him, which it would have had to do if it was curving away from him. If it was enough to, if there was enough discrepancy to hide, 50% of the boat, then it would have had to also have been tilting away from him on all axis points. And he determined that it wasn't. Therefore, it was just perspective. There was no tilt. And that's something that we can all do today as well. So I like to talk about that as well. But again, I could talk about proofs all day. Olber's paradox, for example, which is another.
Keep it coming. I love it. This is great.
Oh yeah, German scientist, 1750, whatever, 18th century anyway. Name was Olber. He realized that if the universe was expanding outwards, as was thought by the Newtonian kind of model of the heliocentric system, that there should never be any spot in the night sky at all, ever, that was ever void of light. That it should be completely always bright white with stars, because it's a mathematical equation that says if there's so many stars over this distance and we multiply that distance out by almost infinity, it's going to put too many stars in the sky. So there shouldn't be any black at night, but of course there is. And it's an actual mathematical equation. There's actual math to it based on the volume of a sphere. So
we've got
pi r squared.
We've got the heliocentric system, so we're centered around the sun. But ultimately, in the heliocentric system, you've got these other suns at vast distances, and they're astronomically bigger than our own sun. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah, I agree. Especially in light of the P900 footage that we've been seeing lately. And you can also get the same kind of images, by the way, that's the Nikon P900 for anybody that's interested. Look that up.
That cracked me up, actually. Patricia Steer just did a little, a tongue-in-cheek Patricia CIA exposed. And on the last shot, she had her with the P900 looking at a really flat horizon and something like the strap line. She doesn't do her own experiments. But like you say, the P900 is one of those technological advances that's given us the ability to do all of this sort of stuff, like the Bedford level experiment.
Yep. And you could also get the same results from a... Yeah, but this one's really good. It's like 380 something digital. It's like crazy. But you can also get the same kind of results with a 70 millimeter telescope. So if you don't have to have one of these new fancy ones. If you can just, even an old 70 millimeter, but that'll work. Which is crazy. So these effects that are coming up are not looking like stars. So when you point at a star, it's coming up more looking like a geometrical pattern, with a middle point that you can see that's fluctuating, that seems to be vibrating, and that actually seems to be vibrating at a certain frequency. So when people are talking about distances and colors being, redshift and all this distances and crazy amounts of distances, of course they tell us trillions of miles and stuff.
Slap another zero on, it's another...
I don't think that's true. I think it's more like It has to do with the vibration rate of that star. And I don't think they're, of course, I don't even think they're as high as what flat earthers think they are. I think they're close.
Oh man, I agree. Sometimes at night when it's particularly clear, they look like you could pluck the thing out of the air. It's amazing. They look like they're just there.
Yeah, I'm one of the guys that think that the sun and moon and stars are, if they're 100 miles or 200 miles, I wouldn't be surprised.
Oh, really? That close?
Yeah, or less. I don't know. I think our limitation, we see limitations of about, if we're to believe what we're to believe, and if we extrapolate what we're to extrapolate, probably some people would say 60 miles, whereas other people would say 20 to 30 miles, 25 miles. Some people say 73 miles where that rocket bounced off the GoPro, where they go fast? Go fast rocket, which was interesting too. Which brings me to another small point while it's on the top of my head. A lot of people talk about how it seemed to hit like a soft kind of barrier where it didn't just explode. It might have hit something softer and then didn't penetrate it, though. And we think of there might be water above now not only because of the star shimmering effect that I just talked about a little bit, but a lot of different reasons. It could literally be a water or water-like substance above us, and as what we think of space.
So if you've got Crow with the lunar wave.
Right. It's a wave. Yeah, you never know. But they've just discovered underwater lakes. So there's actually heavier water that's full of a different, like a mineral, that makes it heavier than the other water. So you got a scuba gear and you're down in the lake or in your submarine, and there's another lake at the bottom of you that your submarine can't penetrate, but it's still water. And you can even see waves rippling on it. You can see underwater waves rippling on it. Crazy stuff, underwater lakes. So it's some kind of water, but it's heavier, and they can't penetrate it. So I'm thinking maybe what's on the bottom is also on the. I was just thinking what's on the bottom might be on the top.
Yeah, I was going to say, they tell us a lot as well. Like they tie the space thing in terms of the people who've been down to, say, the Mariana Trench. They say there's more people that have been on the moon. Nod. But they obviously tell us, they disclaim that underwater is very seldom explored, or very little of it has been actually mapped, if you want to phrase it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we can only go, whatever, down 8 miles or so. Excuse me. It seems to be an impenetrable area at about that distance. So,
sure.
We don't really know what we're dealing with, top or bottom.
One thing we do know what we're dealing with, and you back to the debunkings just because I like it. Another thing that you're really good at is sort of picking apart things that NASA provide people with and they firmly believe in.
Oh God, NASA is definitely one of my favorites. I don't know where to start because that's the one that got me going to begin with, right?
With the moon landings that didn't ever happen.
With the moon landings, yeah. So,
let's just say that once more, actually.
Not only
the moon landings didn't happen.
Well, the moon landings we were presented with didn't happen. That's all that I can be sure of. Whether they did anything else, we don't know, right? Now, people do. There's a bunch of thoughts out there. Is the moon and the sun, are they like are they literal things you could step on, or are they?
Well, let's get into this. I mean, before you get into the debunking, what do you think of the moon and sun? Do you think that they are physical objects like rocks, terra firma? Do you think that they're lights in the sky?
I always did.
Because we don't know.
Yeah, I always did until this point, but flat Earth makes you consider everything else, right? So, the effect I see with the red shift that can occur with a lunar eclipse, for example. That bothers me with a solid moon. That I see transparency there. I don't know if anybody else sees what I see, but if you were to put an object behind a translucent moon, like a semi-see-through moon, like a sheet of paper or whatever, a giant sheet of paper, whatever behind the moon, if it was semi-see-through, it would do the same thing. It would show the same red effect.
Documented, actually. I mean, it's supposed to be stars that are occulted by the moon or pass behind the moon that are seen through the moon. So this is, been documented for a very long time.
Yeah, there's a lot of flags that depict that, especially in the Muslim world. There's a lot of flags that depict Venus or another star occulting the moon, the crescent moon. And how can you see any star through the crescent moon, right? In a heliocentric model, it's impossible. And
Yeah.
there's half a dozen flags I can think of off the top of my head that, that I've detailed that do that.
Yeah,
So,
we've gone slightly off topic because I'm so really sorry, but yeah, back to
no, that's okay.
NASA and their nonsense.
That was, the flag one was actually one of the ones I used to debunk. Is another proof. Is they're in flags. The stars are that's not possible. But Apollo was man, that was an eye opener. There's a few things I can say were a real eye opener for me in life, and Apollo was one of them. It was like, oh my gosh, they faked the friggin' moon, and where do you want to start?
Well, I mean, I chuckle whenever I think of NASA because it kind of makes me think, how did our parents get fooled by this? And I asked that question in one of my videos, and somebody gave me a really concise answer, somebody who was in their late 60s, 70s, and said when it was presented to us, it went by really quickly on a 17-inch poor quality screen or on the radio for a lot of people, amazingly. Yeah. And you didn't have time to process it, whereas today we have YouTube, we have freeze frame, we have slow motion, we have massive screens, and you can really pick this stuff apart. So it's not surprising that we do. I mean, you talked about flags. We've got flags on the moon that they show us. I don't know where you want to begin, but you take the lead, mate.
I usually begin by saying, you know that famous blue marble shot that we've all been sold, that's in every book, that I use it on all my videos. That's a series of images called the blue marble images, but they actually took those images from 1969 or earlier, for all we know, all the way through 1972. And the one that they published was like the last shot, they say, of them coming back from the moon from the last time ever in 1972, the last mission. And they snap a shot of Earth. And that's the one that's sold to us as a reality. And that is the only one that was sold to us as a reality for decades and decades and decades. That was it. One shot of Earth. And I like to say, well, there's a film that was released not too long ago. Was it A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon? Yep. And Bart Sobrell is running from the Bible one. That was really funny too. But I like to say, funny thing happened on the way to the moon. That's where I would send somebody first to watch about the moon, because it's like a 2-hour doc and you can see all kinds of stuff. And they fake those blue marble shots, and we actually have film of the Apollo astronauts, the Apollo 11 astronauts faking that. We see Michael Collins bright and center, and then the cardboard cutouts in the window. So that's where I would start with that. Say that shot that you think you see, that blue marble image, is fake. They had 3 years to work on it after we busted them, but that footage was never released until recently, so nobody saw that. And then I would get into the Van Allen belt dilemma and say there's supposed to be these killer Van Allen belts up there that people can't go by, and they say they can't even get through it today, but somehow they got through it safely. All those Mars missions, all those moon missions, and that's kind of fun.
If anyone wants to look at it, just Google search trial by fire.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of good documentaries about that, and we even got one of the guys, one of the astronauts. I'm not sure which one it is off the top of my head, but saying that he didn't even know about what they were, the Van Allen belts, and then when he learned about them, he was like, "Oh, we had an experiment to go through there and to look at those and keep our eyes open during the Van Allen belts." First of all, he said he didn't know about them. Then he said he didn't know where they started, and then he said he had an experiment to look at them, all in the same 30 seconds to a minute. And it's just a contradiction on contradiction on contradiction.
I asked about this on the NASA forum, and the answer I got basically was they got lucky. That was the best answer I got from someone at NASA.
Oh yeah, man. Lucky. I got really lucky. They went really quick. And but then I would say, did you know that they lost all their data? Like they literally had the most valuable data in the world ever to exist.
Man's greatest achievement.
Ever. And they lost it. All of the original data is gone. All of it. And then they say they found it, but it was erased over. They taped over the greatest footage that mankind ever had. Come on. Come on, people.
The mission that didn't cost billions, but yeah, the tape that's really valuable. We need to reuse that.
Yeah, yeah. All the information, how to build the rockets, how to get all that, how to get through them Allen belts. Oh, everything was on that. They're all lost. But and then of course there's a multitude of pictures, like the flag, like you say, waving. However, I'm not worried about the flag one. They do explain away the flag one. So I'll give them that. They say there's a wire in there, and it's just a little bit of movement on the astronaut's hand that does it, and that's fine. I can buy that. However, I can't buy that there's no crater underneath the lander. I can't buy that there's no footsteps on the way to and fro from the moon buggy that's up there. When there's moon, they got the moon buggy in the middle of the friggin', place that's like not next to the lander, and there's no tracks.
Or there's tracks that are not next to where the actual
there's tracks and there's
are.
no. Yeah, well, they're not even. Yeah, or the sea rock, for example. There's a rock that looks like it's been paper mache that's got a C on it, and right next to the ground, there's a little marker that says C.
Or the very blatant rear projection background that they've got going on.
Right, and that we'll talk about that in a minute. But there's, they got caught using the same backgrounds, the same mountain range. For example, the lander was never on the same part of the moon. So every time they went to the moon, they went to a slightly different location. They didn't go to the exact same place. Yet we have one shot of this mountain range with the lander in it, and another shot of the mountain range with the lander not in it. So it's an impossibility. It's an absolute impossibility. There's so many pictures. There's so much little stuff.
I'll give a little plug actually to Antonio Subarax. He did a great video called The Lunacy Lander. And a few people said, no, that's just a model. And no, that's what they said went to the moon. And it's a total joke. And it's made of cardboard because they didn't go. That's
right. And the color banding. Have you ever seen that? So in black and white footage, even in black and white footage, if a shadow moves across an entire, the entire view of the camera really quickly, in black and white footage, you'll get a color banding, like the color of the rainbow will show up very, very quickly, like in the shadow, if it's moving fast. It's called color banding. It's a very normal photography effect. It's not special in any way, except for the fact that it shows up in the moon when the astronaut is supposed to be in the distance. He's supposed to be like, a mile away or whatever. And here comes the color banding, which would mean that it would have to be a light source that would be able to do that through the whole shot of, anyway, it's an absolute impossibility to happen on the moon with one light source, which was supposed to be the only one they had, which was the sun. So color banding is very interesting. If you want to look that up, people, it's fun. Most people don't really know about that one, so it's like a new one. There's stuff moving in the breeze. So they got the lander sitting there and a bag on the side of the lander, a utility bag that's just moving with the breeze. Looks like it looks like it's just moving. It's moving. It never stops moving, which is fine. I mean, if you moved it and you were on a vacuum, I guess, whatever. I guess you could play that off. However, in the next shot, they got something that's fallen from the set or something that strikes a string that's being a rope that's hanging, and you see the object strike the rope, and the rope moves like it swings back and forth, and then it just stops. So anyway, they're not on the moon. There's a bunch of that, and the running the Bart Sibrel one where they were running from the Bible is a very interesting one to me too.
Bart Sibrel himself is quite interesting because when we started this interview, that you first came to Flat Earth and started looking at the moon landing being fake and a bit of a hoax, to put it modestly. But then you said you didn't come to Flat Earth, and Bart Sibrel similar in that respect. I mean, you plugged his footage to say, look, this is all nonsense, and here's footage to prove it, because he received unedited footage of them literally taking pictures of Earth from space. Right. He's definitely not a Flat Earther. He's like you back when you first came to Flat Earth or first encountered Flat Earth, which is awesome. Well,
yeah, I didn't spend. Like I said, I probably kind of pondered it for a week or so before I went, okay, it's time to look into Flat Earth more. But the moon stuff hit me like a ton of bricks. It's just because you dive into something. When you dive into it, you can weigh it, and then you can rationally think about it. I hadn't done that to flat Earth yet, and some people never do that to flat Earth. Some people just ridicule it and move on. They never really dive into it, thinking. And I am 100% convinced that this is, like a spiritual attack on humanity. That's my angle that I come from. So,
which part? Sorry, I don't follow you.
Oh well, I think there's so much corruption going on in the world that it doesn't even need to be organized. That there does need to be a rhyme or reason for it, at least. If they're spraying chemtrails over my head, that means they're spraying it over their own heads, the bad guys. And that might not make sense to anybody unless you think that there's something else afoot. It's not just about control over resources or whatever. There's something else at foot here, something greater.
Right. We don't know what the deception is, and we don't know what we don't know.
Well, everybody's got their opinions, I guess, and that's really what brought me to flat Earth, because I'm a Christian, and I prayed and said, I told you that I left the Christianity. I didn't really leave Christianity, but I kind of explored other things 10, 15 years ago or whatever, and I ended up coming back to Christianity, and then being a born again Christian until now. But I mean, about 2 years ago, I started to say, look, I want to know what the big truth is, because I know it's not the Roman Catholic Church. I know organized religion's corrupt, but I have this in-depth belief in it, and I understand that I'm biased in that respect. I completely understand that. However, I'm still trying to weigh everything against that. What makes me moral and what makes me what I believe, and so I started to look outside of the church, not necessarily giving it up, but not giving the Bible up by any means, but giving the church up. Yeah, I gave up organized religion because I didn't find the truth there. So it led me to people like Santo Spinaci and New Age religion. I watched the Zeitgeist movies and a bunch of other thought patterns, we'll say, and expressions. And from that, it made me question Christianity as a reality. So I'm glad to say that I came back and found that Christianity is most definitely the contradiction to all the rest of them, and that it's kind of portrayed as only one of the other star god kind of religions for a reason, specifically because they want to demote us to being one of the other ones. And I'm saying that there's a reality to the original story, which I believe Christianity can teach if it's rightly divided, and that original story was corrupted hundreds of ways in all manner, including all kinds of New Age ways, including the Roman and Greek gods and the Norse gods and the Babylonian gods and all these stories. These are the corruptions of the original story, which is told in the stars. So there's no denying that there's a connection to astrology or astronomy, whatever you want to call it, I guess, depending on your view. But there is a connection, and to run away from that connection is silly, right? So
we had
I just
disagreements about this. Again, we talked about this before we did the show maybe a week ago, and maybe you don't want to talk to this, but you were talking specifically about Robin Poe and the rigid nature of Catholicism.
Oh, I love Robin's work. Don't get me wrong. I'm sorry. I do. I love.
I watch your Bible study. I love it.
Yep, me too. She doesn't. She probably doesn't know I watch, but I do. Yeah, I love a beautiful person. I just don't believe in Catholicism. I've been down that road. I've been down that road. That's all I can say. It's my belief that it's completely corrupt. However, there's great people in it. Don't get me wrong. Great people in it. My grandmother, devout Christian. Like you said, Robin comes across as, the nicest person in the world, and rightly so. So I have nothing against her by any means. I had issue with a Catholicism point. We'll just put it that way.
I'll leave it there and bring it on. Yeah, Robin's great. No, Robin's got the biggest heart and the thickest skin as well. I'll tell you that for nothing. Maybe you could talk to something else that was equally fascinating. Again, this isn't very flat Earth, but it was something you were talking about. How can I phrase this without taking all of your words away from me? About Adam and Eve. If I say that,
I knew you wanted to talk about. Yeah, I grew up Catholic, but not understanding the Bible really. I never dove in and studied it, but when I started to, I found a certain preacher that had a belief, and his belief, of course, transferred to me because he was my guide at that point. And I stayed with this guy for like 5 or 6 years because he was so good, and it made perfect sense. He knows the languages, he knows all kinds of stuff. But anyway, that's not my point. I don't want to push any man because you can look it up yourself. However, the theory isn't new. However, there's a lot of just with everything, with every piece of truth, there's a lot of different ways you can explain that, or you can have a dogma towards any one of people's beliefs. But here's the long and short of it. Here goes. Biblically, my belief is that in the beginning, that I believe in something called the serpent seed. So that's putting it out there bluntly for people. And now that basically says that Adam and Eve were in the Garden of Eden, Genesis 3, and it describes the story. And I'm saying that the sin that was created or that was made, whether it was more than one aspect to it, but at least the aspect was there of sex. So sex was definitely the sin in the garden. That was the act. Now there's more to it, obviously disobeying God, and he's got one rule, and he said don't do it, and you went and did it. So that's obviously a problem. But the act itself was sex. So the result of this act is that Eve is in labor, and she's in pain, and that she has 2 children, Cain and Abel. Now it's my contention that they're twins, and that they're fathered by 2 different people. That while Adam is the father of Abel, the serpent, whatever you want to call him, the being, which is really comes across as like a fallen angel, the devil, Satan. A lot of people have a lot of names for him, but it really means brilliant, shiny one. So it still gives that special kind of connotation to it. Like he was one of God's angels. That's what I think. And he tempted Eve, and Eve did the deed. And then she showed Adam, and he partook as well. He did the deed with Eve. So I think she got pregnant by 2 beings on the same day, which happens in the animal kingdom all the time, like every cat you've ever heard of. And it happens in prostitution rings. And there's a big fancy word for it too. But anyway, yes, I believe that. And I believe that the Bible rightly divided will teach that completely. And there's no punctuation or chapter divisions in the original word of the Bible, like the original scriptures. People have added in chapter 3, the end period. And then chapter 4 starts this way. There was none of that originally. So when you divide that just like a sentence different, one sentence, the whole story can make sense that way. So it's my contention that the chapters are put in the wrong places, sometimes probably on purpose. But so there's a physical seed to the devil, or to the evil one, and the Bible says that these 2 lines, these 2 seeds of Adam and Satan, they're going to be Eve's children. They're going to be at odds with each other. So they're going to be at odds with each other. And yeah, sorry, had a little interruption. But so the whole way through the Bible, these 2 lines are at odds with each other, and one is kind of out to get the other one. And of course, through the good line is where Jesus comes from, and basically the Bible stories, the lineage of the Bible goes through this good line, but the evil line is always there, and it's always around them. And this is the evil line was never supposed to be there. They're a progeny of angelic beings and humans. They're like a blasphemy of sorts. You can even think of them as they weren't supposed to be here. So that's why the flood of Noah happened, is to wipe out those beings that weren't supposed to be here. Now, whether they went and they turned little lizards into dinosaurs, or whether they were already big, or what happened with that, and who knows, but there was all kinds of, genetic freakery going on back then, and God had to wipe it out. So whenever you hear of Noah's flood killing everybody, or whenever you hear of the stories of the the Old Testament God sending the sword of Israel out to slay women and children and cattle and everything, you got to research who those people were, because he never ever does that to normal Joe Blow. He does that to only the descendants of these people, of the ones that were genetically modified. So that's the sword of Israel. And it's a science fiction story on its own, and a lot of people don't see that at all. They've never heard of that. But Genesis 6, the angels came down, mated with women, created offspring. The offspring are known as giants, mighty men, and so forth. And that's the explanation of how for me anyway, of the Greek and Roman gods and the Norse gods and everything. Those are the mighty men that they created. Those are the ones of renown.
The Nephilims.
Absolutely, 100%, yes.
All right, so worth giving Rob Skiba a bit of a plug, maybe.
100%. Love Rob Skiba's work. Great guy, honest guy, I think. And his work, the Nephilium work. I've been into the Nephilium, the whole angle of that, for a few years before Flat Earth as well. So it's kind of nice to see it come full circle and have meaning in our world as well.
Yeah, definitely. I've just got a few more questions and then we'll round up, maybe 10 or 15 minutes time, if that's okay with you, Chris.
Sure. Sure.
You mentioned this a little bit earlier when you were talking about getting into debates and stepping back with your friends and family. I mean, are you quite open with them about your beliefs, and do you often debate them about it?
I'd never been onto that. One particular show you and I were on together was a fluke, because I had never been to that channel before, and I wouldn't go back. It's not a useful thing to go back. There's like 7 or 8, cognitively disassociated people at that on the panel, and that's about it. That's all that's there. So I'm not worried about that. So no, I wouldn't necessarily debate them on their turf like that, but given a bigger audience, I don't mind a debate.
Sorry, I meant your friends and family as opposed to the horrible.
Oh, I'm sorry. So,
yeah, are they people that you'll talk about Flat Earth and say, well, here's my perspective on things? I do it, and I come up against the same thing. I will find a wall of cognitive dissonance, and eventually they'll just say no.
Well, I find that if I talk to people on an individual level, it's different. They can nod their head and go, okay, that's interesting or whatever. But you get them in a group environment where one doesn't want to look stupid, and it can be 3 or 4 people ganging up on you saying, no, of course not. What are you talking about? And they just won't believe your point of view. My point of view is you understand the news is fake, right? You understand our national news is scripted. It's the same story from coast to coast. They don't even change the friggin' sentences. Like, same adjectives, same adverbs, same everything. It's ridiculous. That can go even from North America to Europe, the same damn story. I couldn't believe it when I heard it. Over and over again, our news is scripted. Like, do you understand that? And they won't believe it. And I'll show them a clip of it where there's like 20 networks all saying the same thing across the nation, and they won't believe it. So I don't know what you're supposed to say to people like that. They believe their reality so much that they won't even contemplate there being a possibility of something different. It's difficult. It can be, especially when it's family. So my suggestion is drop a seed. Don't fight. If they come at it from a fighting perspective, this is family, right? They love you, but they probably know you. You're little Jimmy that, did this or that. You're little Bobby or your little Cindy that did this or that, and your kid, they know you. You're not giving them any special knowledge. They know exactly who you are in their head, right? So even Jesus Christ couldn't preach in his hometown. They didn't believe him. So just saying.
I mean, this ties actually quite nicely into the last thing I was going to talk to you about, which was quite a deep conversation that we got into, which is false flags, but more specifically looking to the future. And I know you think there's potentially going to be a false flag event that will usher in the New World Order. I do. This is probably more than a 10-minute topic, but if we can round out the show with that.
Sure. I'm a realist in a way, where I believe that while Flat Earth is doing a great amount of good right now, and it is opening up people to the deceptions in the world, I don't think that we can defeat them by making videos and I don't think we could fight them like physically, because they've got the power, they've got the numbers, they've got, it's not feasible. So I don't think that we can defeat this system before they get it into play. They're going to usher in their New World Order, and I don't think there's anything we can do to stop it. Whether they use a false flag or a pending alien invasion, or they could use anything they wanted to push this over the edge, knock out our money for a few days, and then we'll be, after a week of not having groceries, you'll be begging for whatever new system comes your way. So I'm thinking that's probably going to happen, and they're going to usher in their new world order. And I don't think we can stop it. However, my whole goal is wake up enough people to get your minds ready for when we're in that new world order, to see the bullshit that's happening then. Because it's my view that that's the last stage. And the whole biblical thing will come to fruition. The new world order is like the last stage of that.
Oh, you're already there. You talked earlier about us having a capitalized name, the industry name.
We're very close.
Is that not just the mark of the beast already?
I don't think so, because it's close. It's close. I'll tell you that. It's definitely working its way there. It's not a big stretch to say that it'll only take a few years to move from our system to a total dependent on electronic money and one world government. I can see that transition, one world law. I can see that happening not too long of a time. I don't think we're there right now. I think we're very close. I know George Orwell talked about 1984 in his book and stuff, and I can see so much of that today, but I still see that we have freedom to do things like we're doing right now, and we wouldn't have that, I don't think, in the new world order. I don't think we'll have the freedom to talk openly about negatively about the system.
I mean,
but while we can,
sorry, go on.
No, I was just saying, while we can, I think we should, and I don't think we're there yet until we can't.
But do you think flat Earth is that thing you said about waking people up? And do you think
absolutely
it's a pretty big paradigm shift to use? But then again, if you're going to hit someone on the head with something, it might as well be a sledgehammer.
Yep. Yeah, there's nothing bigger for me that can wake somebody up. I know a lot of people that they weren't even spiritual in the least, that have contemplated, well, my goodness, if it didn't happen because of the Big Bang, or that isn't possible, then what else is there but a creator aspect to it, right? For example, if we're an infinite plane, there's or similar, then that kind of throws the whole randomness aspect out of it, doesn't it? And not that I believe in any of the heliocentric model anymore. I wasn't a big believer in the Big Bang, but I thought to myself, as a Christian, I thought, well, why not? Well, God could do that. God could do anything he wanted. He could use a Big Bang. He could use evolution. He could use all that shit. But now I realize that that's all meant to hide God from you. That is exactly what it's meant to do. What you believe God, or how you get to, what you believe, I'm not going to push people. I'm certainly going to give my opinion, but I'm not going to, say you're evil for not believing what I believe. But there's nothing bigger than the flat Earth to waken somebody up to the shit that's going on around them, because they can go outside and look. And like you said, it's not scary, like looking into Sandy Hook or 911 might be, or breaking some truth bomb. This is just go outside and look. Just go look. So
yeah,
that's
still going to be flat tomorrow as well.
Oh yeah. So I'm there. There's such a people in the Bible called the 144,000, and I know there's some Bible believers out there that'll know what I'm talking about. It's in the Book of Revelation. It's talking about people being awake during the time and being witnesses for the truth. And I really think that those people will be made of flat earthers. That is just what I believe, because they see the truth. So I'm hoping the flat earth is the thing that wakes people up, keeps them awake during the time of the end, which is, I think, right around the corner. When we have a one currency system, that's when I think we'll be in that system.
Yeah, I mean, just one final point then. What elements of flat Earth have given you some extended positivity?
Well, I see the light at the end of the rainbow. I don't necessarily think. I think everybody wants that light to be at the beginning of the rainbow, if you know what I mean. But
yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
There is a pot of gold. There is a pot of gold. It's at the end, though, and so be aware. Recognize reality when you see it. You should know that if they show 1,000 ships coming to invade us from the sky, or the sky on fire, or some weird thing. Probably just a hologram. It's probably some technology that they worked in. So look what's real. Trust yourself, trust your senses, and there is a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. So
you've said it a couple of times now. I wasn't going to address this, but it sounds like you veer towards infinite plane theory. And earlier on, you said you were quite into aliens. Is that a connection that's there for that reason, or?
doesn't mesh very well, but I don't mind if there's an infinite plane. I don't mind if there's puddles everywhere. I don't mind, puddle theory. I don't care. It doesn't matter to me what the reality is. However, I just don't see a drop in curvature. I don't see the curvature. I don't see the drop in the horizon.
Yeah, exactly. It's still flat. It doesn't matter what's going on that
I can just, as high up as we go, eye level horizon. That bothers me. That screams bigger than I can tell, or infinite plane. So,
yeah.
And I also want to leave with people with saying that the firmament, the dome that people talk about, think about this just for a moment. If everything has to do with perspective, everything, the sun is only ever seen at actual position when it's dead overhead of you at like solar noon. The rest, it's all apparent position and shows signs of perspective. So would the dome. Like, it would have to be seen in a perspective light, if you know what I mean. And I don't think flat earthers talk about that a lot. They understand the perspective on Earth, but the dome itself would have to be showing signs of perspective, which means it could very well could just be flat and not curved at all. It could just be flat. And we see things, we see things like that we see in cones. We see in, do you know what I mean by that, Nathan?
Yeah, it's flat.
The Earth's flat. I think the firmament is flat above it. That's my view. I think we just see in that dome aspect because of how we see up, how we see things in the sky. But
sure.
I've really enjoyed this chat. I really have.
Yeah, it's been brilliant.
I appreciate it.
Before we do go, can you just give another quick plug to your website and your channel on YouTube?
Sure. Thank you.
And we'll round out.
Yep. My channel on YouTube is called The Flat Earth Reality, all 4 words. And my name is Chris Rock with a W, silent W at the beginning of rock. I know it's weird, but that's okay. It's just a fake name. It's my stage name for my music career that I kind of morphed over to this flat Earth world. However,
where can people find your 36 proofs and such?
Yeah, you can find me on Facebook. You can look up Chris Rock, WRoCK, and you'll see my real name and everything. I'm not hiding it. Just don't promote it. And you can find my website, tfer.info. And as I said, The Flat Earth Reality YouTube channel. And I just put out a bunch of stuff. I'm putting out little 1 minute, 2 minute clips, short attention span clips right now.
They're
and
brilliant.
I'll be doing a bigger one. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Chris Rock, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on Flat Earth UK.
It's been a pleasure to be here. If anybody wants to contact me, do so. Thank you so much, Nathan. I appreciate it.
It's been a real pleasure. And to everybody who's tuned into the show, there's been a few people in chat chatting away happily as always. It's been great having you here. I've been Nathan Oakley, and I'll see you all in the next video.